Welcome to our presentation titled Stepping Up, Supporting a Virtual Summer Undergraduate Research Program. My name is Zahra Premji.
And my name is Alix Hayden, and today we're going to showcase how the library stepped up to provide e-learning support this past summer.
Let's start at the beginning. In 2019, Alix and I applied for a Development and Innovation Grant through the University of Calgary Teaching and Learning Grants program. Our grant was for a project to develop an in-person workshop series to teach knowledge synthesis methodologies. This would be a general, methods-focused approach to systematic reviews that would be relevant to any discipline. As part of our plan, we hoped to be able to customize and offer the workshops to specific research groups, including the PURE program, which is the Program for Undergraduate Research Experience, as some of the students in that program conduct systematic or scoping reviews. We developed a series of 3 workshops, 2 hours each, which was piloted in fall 2019. We included an observational study as part of the pilot to improve and update the content and teaching strategies. It was set to be offered again in winter 2020. But we were interrupted after the first workshop by the COVID pandemic, so we had to rethink how to transition to the virtual environment if we wanted to continue delivering the rest of the workshops.
The PURE program provides financial support to University of Calgary undergraduate students to conduct research for 8, 12, or 16 weeks between May and August. The program provides a unique opportunity for students to develop research skills and explore research interests, including the ability to collaborate, communicate, and think critically and creatively. This program was started in 2015 and is offered by the Taylor Institute for Teaching and Learning. In 2020, the applications for the PURE program were due in early February, with notifications expected 6 to 8 weeks after the application deadline. The COVID-19 pandemic also affected the PURE students in 2020, as they had to adapt their research to fit within the campus restrictions. On February 28, 2020, we emailed the PURE organizers to discuss offering our systematic review workshop series, and we set a meeting date for March 25th. We plan to offer the workshop series tailored to undergraduate students who would be completing a systematic or scoping review as part of their PURE research. But on March 18th and 19th, 2020, the pandemic required closure of most of the campus physical spaces, including labs, classrooms, and the libraries. Our in-person meeting on March 25th was turned into a virtual meeting with the PURE program organizers. As the meeting progressed, we realized that there was an opportunity to do more to support the program. In the end, we offered more than we initially planned. In late April, we reached out to the PURE organizers once more to propose a personal librarian type of approach, where librarians would introduce themselves to PURE students via email to offer research-related support. On May 6th, we offered our first 90-minute workshop for supervisors on how to support your undergraduate student through a systematic review. And on May 7th, 14th, and 21st, we offered 2 sessions of the systematic review workshop series. A synchronous 90-minute workshop was delivered via Zoom for supervisors, which focused on how to support your undergraduate student through a systematic review. It included an overview of the steps of a systematic review project and outlined areas of support and strategies for specific steps. Here are examples of some of our workshop slides. For each step of the systematic review process, we outlined what is expected and then identified specific activities that supervisors can do to support their students. We also went beyond the steps of the knowledge synthesis project and included strategies for project management and data management. We created and provided as an additional resource an Excel spreadsheet to track the project management aspects of a systematic review that might be conducted as part of a PURE project. This specifically helped with tracking dates and person responsible for each of the tasks within the review. An example of the tracking sheet is shown here. The peer organizers advertised the sessions to both the students and supervisors and handled all the other logistics such as registration.
Initially, we planned to offer only one session of the 3-workshop series, but during our discussion with the peer organizers, they felt that even students who were not conducting a systematic or scoping review would benefit from attending the workshops. Furthermore, they offered a badge program to the peer students and felt that our workshops would be great and would count towards one of the badges. As there were between 130 and 140 students in the program, they anticipated that more than 50 students would sign up, which was more than we wanted in one workshop, even if it was virtual. So we settled on 2 sessions of the workshop series, a morning session and an afternoon session on May 7th, 14th, and 21st. The morning series was advertised to a specific group of disciplines, and the afternoon one was advertised to a different set of disciplines, though students could register in either if they had a time conflict. Because of the disciplinary groupings, we customized the choice of databases that were demonstrated in the workshops to those most commonly used in the relevant disciplines. Each session of the workshop series was synchronous, delivered via Zoom, and retained all of the interactive elements of the in-person workshops. This included Zoom polls, collaborative Google Docs, Google Forms activity, and breakout rooms. As a side note, we had to figure out how to transform our in-person workshop series to an online format within 4 weeks after the pandemic caused campus closures. We also created a LibGuide where resources for both students and their supervisors were shared, and where pre-readings for the workshop series could be shared with the students. The final element of support was a personal librarian-like outreach approach previously mentioned. The goal of this program was to remind students that the librarians were available to assist them while they worked from home on their research. There was 14 librarians who participated and 138 students. Librarians volunteered to be the librarian based on discipline or topic of the research and received anywhere from 3 to 28 students. Alix and I coordinated and sent a template welcome email out to the participating librarians and also coordinated the distribution of student emails. We did not collect metrics for this program, however, we know anecdotally from librarians that some students reached out for assistance. An example of our template email is shown on the screen. So what were the benefits? Our experience has led to relationship building with the Teaching and Learning Institute at our institution, as well as with students and their faculty supervisors. It has also led to further collaborations with the Taylor Institute on other undergraduate research or experiential learning initiatives. Our 3 main lessons learned from this experience with supporting undergraduate students virtually are: 1. Be proactive. Reach out to external units that support undergraduate research, and you never know what might happen. 2. Undergraduate students can participate in systematic reviews with the right supports. And 3. There may be an opportunity to provide support to faculty who are supervising undergraduate systematic review research and to think about what supports faculty may find useful, especially if they are also relatively new to knowledge synthesis projects.
We had 196 students attend across the 6 workshops and 26 attendees at the supervisor's workshop. Librarian help was mentioned in one of the peer students' presentations who had conducted a systematic review. And I worked with 2 peer students on their scoping review, which was recently published. Both students attended our workshops. And we found this quote. The student noted, "The experience and knowledge I gained from participating in various workshops and working on a systematic review has directly contributed to my growth as a student researcher."
We would like to acknowledge the Taylor Institute and University of Calgary for the grant funding and support. We would also like to acknowledge that the idea for the Supervisor's Workshop came from a discussion with University of Toronto librarian Caitlin Fuller, and the beautiful photos of our campus used in this presentation were taken by Dave Brown. and we will be happy to answer questions here or via email anytime.
Hello, and welcome to our showcase titled Virtual Practicums, Unique Challenges and Opportunities. Thank you very much for eLearning and Library Symposium for having us. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge several Indigenous territories significant to our education and practicum experience. Firstly, we acknowledge with respect the Treaty 6 territory which the University of Alberta is located on, where diverse Indigenous peoples including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota, Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others who influence our vibrant community.
The University of British Columbia is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people.
And the University of Victoria stands on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen peoples, along with Esquimalt and Husainich people, whose historical relationship with the land continue to this day.
So thank you for attending our presentation today. My name is Teo.
And my name is Monica.
And we are both MLIS candidates at the University of Alberta through the online and part-time stream. We have both completed a 100% online practicum at each of our host locations. My practicum placement was in the Digitization Center at the University of British Columbia Library, the same library where I also work as the European Languages Cataloger in the Technical Services Department.
And my practicum was at the University of Victoria Library's Acquisitions Unit. To provide more background information about the U of A's practicum program, it is offered as a 3-credit course through the School of Library and Information Studies to a senior MLIS students.
The practicum is designed to be a part-time experience of 100 hours over 10 to 12 weeks, where students gain practical workplace experience and experiential learning opportunities. The practicum encourages the students to show independent initiative with a strong emphasis being placed on developing leadership skills and the concept of self-leadership, while also gaining insights into the organizational culture and structure.
There were 10 practicum students in the program during the fall 2020 semester, including myself and Teo, located all across Canada. The students' physical location played the biggest role in the effect of COVID-19 in their practicum. Of the 10 students, 5 students completed their practicum completely online, while 4 had the opportunity to complete theirs in person. Only 1 student had a mixed approach, where they had a blended approach of in-person and remote interaction.
With the program's strong focus on experiential learning, we both have project-focused practicums. My placement consisted of 2 mutually exclusive projects. The first one consisted of performing an assessment of the British Columbia History Digitization Program, sponsored by the Irving K. Barber Learning Center. This evaluation involved preparing a detailed assessment plan for the program based on a review of its analytics, conducting research of the program and the collections developed as a result of it, building and distributing a survey to past and prospective participants asking for feedback on program application and achievements, and drafting a marketing strategy for future promotion of the program. The second phase of my practicum consisted of metadata and standardization for the library's web archiving collections using the Archive-It service. Working on these collections ensured that they become more discoverable to users and in a position to be integrated in an ILS discovery layer in the future.
My project at the University of Victoria was to first promote newly acquired evidence-based acquisitions database through the library's social media. And my second project was to perform a database maintenance on the library's LibGuides app, where database description and invalid links and entries were checked and identified. Another significant part of my practicum was online job shadowing, where I've interacted with 42 librarians across 3 institutions. The main focus of the job shadowing were professional development and networking, where I was able to gain insight into each individual's role in the organization and to explore various career options.
COVID-19, as it has affected all kinds of normalcy around the world, has the biggest impact in our practicum experience. As students who were both planning to complete the program during this academic year, whether the practicum was going to be offered at all was a big question to begin with. Then the second challenge was to find a placement that is willing to accept a practicum student during a pandemic and navigate the whole new ordeal of online practicum with remote work arrangements. As part of the practicum application process, we were required to submit a detailed Plan B in anticipation of further lockdown and social distancing procedures.
Another challenge with an online practicum was juggling other responsibilities during a global pandemic. Since we were both online and part-time students, Teo had a full-time job while I balanced additional coursework along with the practicum. With all our commitments now being done remotely at home, Drawing the line between various responsibilities was a big task, as many others have experienced in the last couple months. One of the largest impact of all was learning to think like a librarian without being in the environment at all. Since practicums are opportunities to transfer our knowledge gained through our MLIS program into actual work, not being able to physically be in the environment and naturally interact with others was quite challenging.
With everyone adjusting to the remote work environment, the host of the practicum also experienced certain challenges. The first challenge was surrounding scheduling, as any interaction now had to be rescheduled through Zoom compared to natural water cooler interaction. With the host being the liaison between the student and the organization, they were tasked with managing various calendars and setting up various appointments.
The heightened sensitivity surrounding some organizational information during COVID-19 protocols have limited the number of meetings that the practicum students were able to observe, as privacy was a big concern.
Lastly, another challenge that both the host and the student have experienced were trying to find engagement opportunities apart from the weekly check-ins between the student and the host. One way to counteract that challenge was for us to participate in the regular staff meetings. This enabled both of us to have a more natural participation in the department's workflows without feeling the need to schedule special meetings to find out about these processes.
So, how do we implement the networking and organizational experience aspect of the practicum virtually? A large focus was placed on networking and hands-on experience online. In my case, was focusing on job shadowing and professional networking through the scheduled meetings on Zoom. Although the circumstances surrounding the Zoom networking was quite artificial, Zoom screen sharing functions were quite useful in receiving specific training, in which my case was getting experience in the Ask Away live chat and various modules in the library's ILS.
Technologies such as Google Drive and Zoom facilitated our ability to attend the unit meetings and participate in workflows as discussed in the previous slide, thus enabling us to understand the organizational culture and to become a part of the team. Having an impactful project assignment has enabled us to experience being part of the team's workflows and production. We were both glad that we were assigned real-life projects during our placements and that our work had a tangible effect on our respective organizations. The project was integral in including the practicum student as part of the team rather than as a temporary observer or as a guest.
The practicum experience was definitely a highlight of my MLS degree, and I'm very thankful to have had the experience even during a pandemic. The connections that I made through the networking opportunities was one of the most valuable aspects of my practicum, and it definitely gives me a strong foundation as an early professional.
Learning new practical technologies and learning the principles of management and self-leadership were also important skills that both of our practicums helped us develop. Throughout our degree, these skills have been at the forefront of our research and discussion, so it was extremely fulfilling getting to experience them in a practical sense. Lastly, as part of our practicum course, we each had the chance of sharing our experience with our fellow practicum colleagues. This once again reinforced our belief in the great diversity of our work and profession.
In sharing our practicum highlights, here are some suggestions that a potential practicum host could consider. With an ongoing pandemic, various organizations should consider that the online practicums or mixed interactions could be the feasible alternative or the norm for the foreseeable future. In hosting an online practicum, an extra effort through further steps are required to facilitate students into staff and unit workflows with the obvious lack of physical presence.
Successful work experience could take various forms, so don't be afraid to sincerely express to your future instructors or practicum supervisors the types of library work you believe you would excel at. Also, don't feel discouraged if at first your practicum placement does not look like something you might want as a librarian. You'll be surprised to find that you had the abilities which you didn't know you had. Lastly, our collective experience demonstrates that successful online practicums are not only possible, but also rewarding.
Lastly, here are some aspects that we believe have contributed to our successful practicum experiences. First is to always keep an open mind and being fluid with any ongoing circumstances. It is also important to always be prepared through contingency plans. Additionally, having mutual understanding that the practicum can be a rewarding experience for both parties can increase motivation and enthusiasm for the process.
Approach practicums as an ethical mandate to help students step into the profession. It is a host's chance to become a mentor to a new librarian, thus helping to the continuation and growth of the field. Assigning real-life professional and organizational projects will help students gain real experience and tangibly contribute value to the team.
As we wrap up the presentation, We would like to thank Dr. Alvin Schrader, our practicum instructor, for his support and guidance throughout the practicum. Also, we would like to thank our host organization and practicum supervisors, without whom this experience wouldn't have been possible. Thank you so much to David Boudinot and the University of Victoria.
And I would also like to thank my supervisors at UBC Library, Larissa Ringham, Mimi Lam, and Susan Patterson for a wonderful practicum experience. Thank you so much for attending our session today. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us through our email. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Danya Leebaw from the University of Minnesota, and I'm here together with Nadine Hoffman from the University of Calgary. Our presentation on learning from Zoom bombing, tips and tricks for security. So we will share about an unfortunate experience we had as a committee in a section just about a month ago, but also some reflection and learning and what we learned from it. We'll share some specifics about what happened in our Zoom bombing incident, what we did in response, and also what we have already learned. As part of that, we'll also share considerations for planning your next Zoom event. A webinar hosted by the ACRL Politics, Policy, and International Relations section, which also goes by PIPPERS for short, was taken over by unwanted intruders, Zoom bombers for short. We were gathered to hear from a volunteer presenter, Jen Huck from University of Virginia, on international social science data sets. At the time that our session was interrupted, about 15 minutes after its start, we had 115 attendees, so a very well-attended session we were excited about. Our presenter was sharing her screen when someone began drawing hateful and offensive images on it. The Zoom bombers also, at the same time, began using audio to speak over the presenter and hosts, saying racist, sexist slurs. In addition, the bombers took over the screen names of legitimate attendees and put offensive statements using their names into the chat. Despite valiant efforts on the part of the presenter, the host, the rest of the committee, and other legitimate attendees to try to identify, figure out who the bombers were and remove them from the meeting, because they took over legitimate screen names, it proved impossible to get a handle on the situation. After a minute or two, which felt much longer, we ended the webinar. We hadn't done any contingency planning for this kind of incident, so we were immediately really at a loss about what to do next. To add insult to injury, we were all isolated in our own homes, uncertain about how to regroup, and feeling very isolated. Thanks to several committee members, what we did was to quickly set up another Zoom just for the committee and invited everybody to join and the presenter. It turned out to be something of a support session to debrief, to be in shock together, but also began to figure out how to reach out to attendees and anyone else affected and really what to do next. As the committee chair, I took the lead in reaching out to the section leadership, who offered support and reached out themselves to ACRL leadership. Some members of the committee scoured the list of registrants to make sure it was accurate and to remove the last-minute intruders. And then I sent a couple of emails to that verified list. In the emails I sent, I acknowledged what happened, how awful it was for all involved, and particularly how difficult it was for our attendees who identify as members of the groups that were specifically targeted and harassed by the Zoom bombers with hateful slurs and images. We also apologized on behalf of the section, reassured we had taken security steps, but we saw that they hadn't worked as intended, and that we would be most likely rescheduling the webinar with more security. All in all, emotional support and strong immediate communication were so important. We heard back from section members and attendees that they were very grateful for PIPPERS taking the incident seriously and reaching out so quickly. I think a question on everyone's minds was, and probably is today, what kinds of security did you have in place? After all, we've all heard a lot about Zoom bombing and steps to take to avoid it since the pandemic began in March. The short answer is yes, we did have security measures in place. We did advertise the webinar to several library professional listservs, but mostly fairly small ones. And no link was ever posted on a publicly accessible website or social media. And there was also a registration process in place. But we did not do enough, clearly. And in the remainder of our time, we'll go over what we have since learned as we looked into what happened and planned for our the webinar, makeup webinar, and another session after this incident occurred. And we'll provide some tips for how to make your meetings and webinars as secure as possible.
So as we all know, Zoom offers a meetings option. It's available to every type of subscription, but some may not know that there's also access to a webinar version, which allows for more security. Each version have pros and cons. From our committee of 6 plus our speaker, only one had access to the webinar, and that was Danya. Regardless of the option, Zoom is regularly updating settings, and your institution may have different options. We had a separate meeting following our initial regroup that Danya outlined and discussed details on how best to proceed. These practices were put in place for the next planned discussion, which had about 20 people on it, a much smaller group, which was a really good test. I had access to webinar software. She made all the committee members panelists, which is the closest thing available to co-hosts. And she locked down every possible security setting other than chat. Committee members verified every original registrant and attendee before sending the new invitation. Danya then used the manual registration process with individual links prior to the webinar to ensure legitimate attendees registered. Registration was then cut off at the start of the webinar. Individual links can lead to troubleshooting difficulties where one person got locked out with nothing that could be done other than providing a recording. We felt bad for that, but 1 out of 85 is a pretty good ratio. Webinar versions enabled the panelists to use chat to communicate with each other during the webinar. Individuals were allowed to chat with each other, which is what the presenter wanted. But the messages in the webinar version also go to the panelists. So we felt good with that because we could monitor that for anything that might go astray. And we also use this function for questions to be asked as opposed to the Q&A option that many of us have seen in webinars. As for the Zoom meeting, the waiting room feature works well, but it takes time to check against all the names of the registrations. It's good to let attendees know what's being done rather than just have dead air while people are waiting to be let in. We sort of rotated every minute or so, letting people know what was going on. Also for the Zoom meetings, we assigned bouncers from our committee members. You need the co-hosts to feel comfortable with the settings so they can remove anyone quickly and not have the meeting hijacked. Here are 2 slides describing our new protocols. Keep Zoom updated. We have all been told that by our IT, but we forget that sometimes. You want to use the passcode screen sharing and muting, which is usually part of your institutional requirements. Be careful where the URL is shared and add a verification to the automatic registration process. That's an easy thing to do, adding mute on entry. And we found that cutting off the registration an hour or 2 before the event was key because most of our Zoom bombers arrived after the meeting had started. The waiting room feature allows for verification, but takes time. We're going to request at our next sessions to see if people can log on early or sign on early. So taking the easy way out can sometimes mean more time in the end. We're recommending this for all our Zoom meetings, and we're using it in our own circumstances. As far as some extra tips that we have determined to avoid future incidents, multiple co-hosts can't be stressed enough for larger events. This was truly a team approach for us from start to finish. The downside to locking the meeting is if people have technical errors, which we also found with the webinar setting. One of our committee members also found that their institution makes their calendar entries public. So that suggestion came from that revelation. Although this was a shocking and horrible experience, our speaker was so graceful in shutting everything down as quickly after she realized what was going on as possible. It was really nice to have the team as a support. We've all learned, and we're using these tips for not only ourselves, but they will also be used for all future professional development committee events. And following an executive meeting, we've also been asked to provide these tips to all the PIPERS committees and may even be distributed more widely in ACRL. The committee also plans to write this up as an article for the next section newsletter in the spring. We're going to continue learning from these experiences.
Hi there. Welcome to Jamming at the Library, using a collaborative digital whiteboard for online learning. My name's Lydia Thorne, and I'm the Health Sciences Librarian at Ontario Tech University and Durham College. Today I'm here to talk to you about a neat tool called the Jamboard and how you can use the Jamboard for teaching in online learning environments. But before I get to this, you need some background information. How did I come across this tool and come to use it for online teaching? It all started last June. Every summer, I teach a class called EVBP 5500, Evidence-Based Practice. This course is taken by students in their 5th semester of the Dental Hygiene program at Durham College. Previously, in this library class, I'd asked students to form groups in order to work on an in-class activity. For this activity, students were asked to look at a printed article record. Using a highlighter, students had to highlight any words that we had typed into the search bar during the class. In other words, keywords. They were then asked to write down 2 words or phrases that they would use to describe what the article was about. In other words, subject headings. These 2 terms were written on 2 sticky notes. After they were done, each group then brought their sticky notes up to the front of the class, and we put them on a big whiteboard at the front. The purpose of this activity is to help students understand the difference between keywords and subject headings. It can also be used to illustrate how subject headings are subjective, as literally every group comes up with 2 different terms to describe the exact same article. With COVID-19 and the move of this class, and many more of my classes online, I found myself wondering, is there any way that I can move this activity online? How do I incorporate active learning in my online classes? And then an idea came to me. Lydia, why don't you try and use our new Jamboard? Last year, Ontario Tech Libraries purchased a Google Jamboard, which is an expensive 55-inch touchscreen display on wheels that has a lot of really cool features. Once you create a board, also called a jam, you can write and draw with a stylus or your fingers. Bad handwriting or drawing skills? I know I do. Not to worry with the Jamboard. Simply use the image and handwriting recognition technology to convert your drawings or handwriting to something that is much more legible. You can also easily insert images or web pages from Google, or you can add a Google Doc from your Google Suite account. You can even host an impromptu Google Hangouts meeting if you want to. The sky's the limit. In addition to a physical board, the Jamboard is also available as a free app and is part of Google Suite. There is more limited functionality with the online app. But you can still draw, you can still add sticky notes, you can still highlight, erase, and you can still add images from your Google Drive account, and so much more. Students can access or edit a jam using their web browser. As an instructor, though, you'll need to change the sharing permissions so that anyone with a link can edit. Students can also access a jam using their mobile phones or their tablets. The Jamboard app is available for free for both Android and iOS devices. So I did some experimenting, and here's how I ended up using the Jamboard for our online EVBP 5500 library class activity. Using my Google Suite account, I was easily able to add an image of the article record to the Jam. Students were then able to use the highlighter tool in the app to highlight keywords. In this case, oil pulling and plaque. Students were then divided into groups and put into breakout rooms. Each group was given a few minutes to look at the article record and to come up with their 2 phrases or words to describe what the article is about. They then had to add their answers on sticky notes in the Jam. Here's some other ideas for how you can use the Google Jamboard in your online classes. You can have students brainstorm synonyms or related terms for a concept, or maybe have them create a concept map to help them with their research question development or topic development. You could also do an activity where you ask students to evaluate sources that they find online, such as this example from an online library orientation class from this past summer. In this activity, students were asked to find and evaluate each resource. They were then told to rank each source, with 1 being the most credible and 3 being the least credible. So, what are a few things that I learned throughout this project? Well, a couple of things, with some trial and error, of course. The first thing that I learned is that the Jamboard app can be used successfully for active learning. Students are able, in these class activities, to demonstrate their understanding of the information literacy concepts presented in class. I also learned that the Jamboard app can be used to increase students' digital literacy skills, or their ability to understand information and perform tasks in digital environments. Using the Jamboard also helped keep students engaged, which is always much harder to do in an online class. I've also found that the Jamboard is great for real-time formative assessment. Are students getting it? Do I need to re-explain a concept after an activity? It can also be used for summative assessment, as you can easily save a Jam as images in either PDF or PNG file format. This allows me to easily go back and view the Jam later, and to make any changes to my teaching as necessary. When I asked students what they liked about the Jamboard app, they told me that they appreciate being able to answer anonymously. They weren't scared of trying to answer a question because their name wasn't in any way attached to their answer. This is much different than, say, using the chat feature of an online webinar platform, for example. And last but not least, I've learned not to make any assumptions about students' technical abilities. While many students are familiar with Google Docs and similar software, others most definitely are not. So, make sure you take some time and show them how to use the Jamboard app first. As with any technology, there is a bit of a learning curve. It doesn't hurt at all to give them some time to play with the Jamboard app first. In fact, if you let them play a bit first, you'll be more likely to have their attention afterwards for your activity. That being said, make sure to turn off the "anyone with a link can edit" after your activity. Speaking from experience, if you forget to do this, you will have a hard time getting your class back on track. If you want to test out the Jamboard, feel free to use this link on my slide to try it out on your own. I've changed the sharing settings to "anyone with a link can edit." So, that's all I have for today's showcase presentation. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you all come away from this talk with some ideas for how you can use the Jamboard in your practice. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out by email or to find me on Twitter. I'm always happy to chat about the Jamboard and any new technologies that can be used for online teaching and learning.